You ever have that one person at work who seems to have it all figured out? The kind of colleague everyone looks up to, someone who always gets the credit for brilliant ideas and game-changing projects? That was Derek. He worked in the same department as me at our advertising agency, and for years, I thought he was my mentor, a guiding light in an industry where it's easy to get lost. But then I found out the truth. Derek wasn't just taking credit for his own work. He was stealing mine. It all started when I first joined the company. I was fresh out of college, eager to prove myself, but painfully aware of how competitive the creative field could be. Derek, on the other hand, was a veteran. He had been with the agency for over a decade and was known for his innovative campaigns and charismatic personality. To me, he seemed like the perfect role model. He'd invite me to brainstorming sessions, review my designs, and offer advice on how to improve them. At first, I was grateful. I thought he genuinely wanted to help me succeed. But then, something strange began to happen. Every time I came up with an idea I was proud of, Derek would praise it during team meetings, but then tweak it slightly and present it as his own. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe the changes he made were significant enough to justify the shift in ownership. Or maybe I was just too inexperienced to recognize the value he added. But the pattern kept repeating itself. Over time, I noticed that Derek's innovations weren't innovations at all. They were my concepts, repackaged and sold as his. The breaking point came when I pitched a campaign I had spent weeks perfecting. It was for one of our biggest clients, a tech startup looking to rebrand itself. I poured my heart into every detail, from the color palette to the tagline. When I presented it to the team, Derek smiled and said, "Great job, Ryan. Let me refine this a bit and see if we can make it even stronger." A few days later, he unveiled the same campaign with minor adjustments as his own creation. The client loved it, and the campaign went viral. Derek received all the accolades, while I was left standing in the shadows, watching someone else take credit for my hard work. That's when I decided to dig deeper. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I started reviewing old files, emails, and meeting notes. What I uncovered shocked me. Derek hadn't just stolen my ideas. He had done the same thing to countless other coworkers over the years. There was a trail of evidence, buried in plain sight, that proved his deceit. Emails where he asked me to clarify certain aspects of my designs, only to use those clarifications as part of his final presentation. Meeting transcripts where he subtly redirected attention away from others' contributions and toward himself. And worst of all, testimonials from former employees who had left the agency disillusioned, claiming they felt exploited by Derek's tactics. Armed with this information, I knew I had to act. But I also knew I couldn't confront him directly. Derek was too slick, too good at manipulating people to his advantage. If I accused him outright, he'd deny everything and turn the situation around to paint me as jealous or bitter. No, I needed a plan, a way to expose him without giving him room to wiggle out of it. The first step was gathering concrete evidence. I compiled screenshots of emails, drafts of my original designs, and even recorded conversations, where legally permissible, to document Derek's behavior. Then I reached out to a few former colleagues who had fallen victim to his schemes. They were hesitant at first, worried about potential backlash or damaging their careers further. But once I explained what I was planning, they agreed to share their stories anonymously. Together, we built a case so damning that there was no way Derek could refute it. Next, I created a website. It was simple but effective. The real story behind Derek's success. The homepage featured a bold headline, followed by a detailed breakdown of his pattern of plagiarism. I included side-by-side comparisons of my original designs versus Derek's improved versions, along with timestamps and metadata proving which came first. I also shared excerpts from emails and meeting notes, highlighting moments where Derek deliberately undermined others to boost his own profile. Finally, I added anonymous testimonials from former coworkers, each describing their experiences with Derek in vivid detail. Once the site was ready, I sent the link to everyone in the agency: executives, managers, junior staff, and even key clients. I framed it as an anonymous whistleblower exposing unethical practices within the company. Within hours, the story exploded. People were outraged. Some dismissed it as gossip, but most couldn't ignore the overwhelming amount of evidence. Screenshots of the website circulated on social media, and soon journalists picked up the story. Headlines like "Ad Agency Veteran Exposed as Idea Thief" and "How One Man Stole His Way to the Top" dominated industry news outlets. Derek tried to fight back, of course. He called emergency meetings, denying the allegations and accusing me, without naming names, of jealousy and sabotage. But the evidence was too strong, too specific. Clients began pulling their accounts, citing concerns about integrity and trust. Internally, morale plummeted as employees questioned whether they had unknowingly supported Derek's unethical behavior. Within days, the CEO had no choice but to terminate his contract. Derek was gone, but the damage to his reputation was irreversible. Still, I wasn't done yet. I wanted to make sure this lesson stuck, not just for Derek, but for everyone in the industry. So I took the stage at our annual design conference, an event hosted by the agency to showcase its creativity and innovation. Disguised as a panelist discussing ethics in design, I delivered a presentation titled "The Cost of Stolen Ideas." Using slides filled with examples from Derek's career, I exposed his methods in excruciating detail. I showed how he manipulated language, twisted narratives, and erased others' contributions to build his empire. By the end of the talk, the audience was silent, stunned by the sheer audacity of his actions. Then I revealed my identity. Standing center stage, I looked directly into the crowd and said, "My name is Ryan, and I'm the person behind the website you've all been talking about." For years, I stayed quiet because I thought speaking up wouldn't change anything. But today, I'm here to tell you that silence only empowers predators like Derek. Never let anyone steal your voice. Never stop fighting for recognition of your work. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, colleagues approached me, thanking me for having the courage to speak out. Clients praised the agency for addressing the issue head-on, despite the initial scandal. And as for Derek, he disappeared from the industry altogether, reduced to a cautionary tale whispered among creatives. In the months that followed, my life changed dramatically. Offers poured in from top agencies eager to hire me, not just for my skills, but for my advocacy of ethical practices in design. I became a speaker at conferences, sharing my story and encouraging others to stand up against exploitation. Most importantly, I regained my confidence. I realized that my worth wasn't tied to external validation. It came from knowing I had fought for what was right. Looking back, I don't regret a single moment of it. Yes, exposing Derek was risky. Yes, it took a toll on me emotionally. But in the end, it was worth it. Not just because I brought him down, but because I inspired others to protect their ideas and demand accountability. Derek may have thought he was untouchable, but he forgot one crucial thing. Karma has a way of catching up to everyone. So why am I telling you this story? Because sometimes the hardest battles lead to the greatest victories. If you've ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or taken advantage of, know this: your voice matters. Your ideas matter. And if someone tries to silence you, don't let them win. Speak up, shine a light, and watch as the truth sets you and everyone else free. Because in the end, justice isn't about tearing someone else down. It's about building yourself up proving your worth, and leaving the world better than you found it. Let me elaborate further, because the story deserves every detail. Let me walk you through every twist, every betrayal, and every moment of vindication. When I first started working at the agency, I was full of hope and ambition. I remember sitting in my cubicle on my first day, sketching out ideas and dreaming of the impact I could make. Derek was one of the first people to approach me. "Hey, Ryan," he said with a warm smile. "Welcome aboard. If you ever need feedback or guidance, feel free to ask." At the time, I thought he was being genuine. Looking back, I realize he was setting the stage for his manipulation. Over the next few months, I began presenting my ideas in team meetings. Each time, Derek would nod approvingly, offering minor suggestions that I assumed were meant to enhance my work. But as the weeks turned into months, I started noticing inconsistencies. Projects that I had conceptualized from scratch were suddenly being credited to Derek. Designs that I had spent hours refining were attributed to him in client presentations. It wasn't until I saw one of my campaigns launched under his name that I realized the extent of his deception. The turning point came when I pitched the tech startup rebranding campaign. I had spent countless late nights perfecting every aspect of it, from the typography to the messaging. When I presented it to the team, Derek leaned back in his chair and said, "This is solid, Ryan. Let me polish it a bit and see if we can elevate it further." I should have seen the red flags. Then the casual dismissal of my effort, the vague promise of improvement. But I trusted him, or at least I wanted to believe he had good intentions. A few days later, Derek unveiled the campaign in a client meeting. The changes he made were minimal, a slight adjustment to the font size, a different color gradient, but the core concept was unmistakably mine. The client loved it, praising Derek for his creativity and vision. Meanwhile, I sat silently in the corner, seething with anger and frustration. That night, I went home and stared at my laptop screen for hours, replaying the events in my mind. How could he do this? How could he take something I had poured my soul into and claim it as his? Oh? It was then that I decided to investigate further. I started digging through old emails, searching for any trace of my original designs. What I found was both infuriating and enlightening. Derek had a habit of asking me to clarify certain elements of my work, only to incorporate those clarifications into his final presentation. In one email chain, he requested a breakdown of my color choices, which he later used to justify his revisions. In another, he suggested tweaking the tagline, a suggestion I implemented only to see it attributed to him in the final version. As the first pieced together the evidence, I reached out to former colleagues who had left the agency. Their stories mirrored my own. One designer recounted how Derek had taken credit for her award-winning campaign, forcing her to leave the company in disillusionment. Another described how he had systematically sidelined junior employees, ensuring they never received proper recognition for their contributions. Together, we formed a coalition, a group of victims united by a shared goal: to expose Derek for who he truly was. Creating the website was a labor of love and vengeance. I wanted it to be thorough, undeniable. I included screenshots of emails, drafts of my original designs, and even audio recordings of meetings where Derek subtly redirected attention away from others. I added testimonials from former colleagues, each recounting their experiences with Derek in vivid detail. Finally, I launched the site under the guise of an anonymous whistleblower, sending the link to everyone in the agency. Watching the fallout unfold was surreal. At first, people were skeptical. Some dismissed the website as a prank, a baseless smear campaign designed to tarnish Derek's reputation. But as more and more details emerged, skepticism turned to suspicion, and suspicion turned to outrage. Clients began questioning whether they had unknowingly supported Derek's unethical behavior. Internally, morale plummeted as employees grappled with the realization that they had been complicit in his schemes. Derek tried to fight back, of course. He denied everything, claiming the website was a fabrication, a malicious attempt to ruin his life. But the evidence was too overwhelming, too specific. There was no way he could explain it away. Within days, he went from being the golden boy of the agency to a pariah. Clients pulled their accounts. Colleagues distanced themselves. And the CEO? She had no choice but to terminate his contract. Even after all that, I wasn't satisfied. I wanted to make sure he knew exactly who was behind his downfall. So I took the stage at the annual design conference, disguised as a panelist discussing ethics in design. Using slides filled with examples from Derek's career, I exposed his methods in excruciating detail. I showed how he manipulated language, twisted narratives, and erased others' contributions to build his empire. By the end of the talk, the audience was stunned by the sheer audacity of his actions. Then I revealed my identity. Standing center stage, I looked directly into the crowd and said, "My name is Ryan, and I'm the person behind the website you've all been talking about." For years, I stayed quiet because I thought speaking up wouldn't change anything. But today, I'm here to tell you that silence only empowers predators like Derek. Never let anyone steal your voice. Never stop fighting for recognition of your work. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, colleagues approached me, thanking me for having the courage to speak out. Clients praised the agency for addressing the issue head-on, despite the initial scandal. And as for Derek, he disappeared from the industry altogether, reduced to a cautionary tale whispered among creatives. In the months that followed, my life changed dramatically. Offers poured in from top agencies eager to hire me, not just for my skills, but for my advocacy of ethical practices in design. I became a speaker at conferences, sharing my story and encouraging others to stand up against exploitation. Most importantly, I regained my confidence. I realized that my worth wasn't tied to external validation. It came from knowing I had fought for what was right. Looking back, I don't regret a single moment of it. Yes, exposing Derek was risky. Yes, it took a toll on me emotionally. But in the end, it was worth it. Not just because I brought him down, but because I inspired others to protect their ideas and demand accountability. Derek may have thought he was untouchable, but he forgot one crucial thing. Karma has a way of catching up to everyone. So why am I telling you this story? Because sometimes the hardest battles lead to the greatest victories. If you've ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or taken advantage of, know this. Your voice matters. Your ideas matter. And if someone tries to silence you, don't let them win. Speak up, shine a light, and watch as the truth sets you and everyone else free. Because in the end, justice isn't about tearing someone else down. It's about building yourself up, proving your worth, and leaving the world better than you found it. To fully understand the depth of Derek's manipulations, let me share some specific examples. One of the earliest instances involved a holiday marketing campaign I designed for a major retail client. I had proposed a concept centered around nostalgia, using vintage-inspired visuals and heartfelt messaging. Derek initially praised the idea, calling it fresh and impactful. However, when the campaign was presented to the client, Derek claimed it as his own, adding a minor tweak to the color scheme and taking full credit for the concept. The client loved it, and Derek received a bonus for his creativity. Another example involved a logo redesign for a nonprofit organization. I had spent weeks researching the organization's mission and values, crafting a logo that encapsulated its essence. When Derek reviewed my draft, he suggested simplifying the design slightly, a suggestion I implemented. But when the final logo was unveiled, Derek introduced it as his own creation, erasing my involvement entirely. The nonprofit praised Derek for his visionary approach, while I was left wondering if anyone would ever recognize my contributions. These incidents weren't isolated. Derek had a systematic approach to stealing ideas. He would often ask for clarifications or minor adjustments, using those requests to justify his involvement in the project. He was careful to maintain plausible deniability, ensuring that his actions were subtle enough to avoid suspicion. But over time, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The emotional toll of Derek's actions cannot be overstated. For years, I doubted my abilities, wondering if I was truly talented or if Derek's refinements were the reason my ideas succeeded. I felt invisible, like a ghost in my own career. But uncovering the truth gave me clarity and purpose. I realized that Derek's theft wasn't just about taking credit for my work. It was about erasing my identity as a creator. And that realization fueled my determination to expose him. When I finally stood on that stage at the design conference, revealing my identity to the world, I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just about Derek, it was about reclaiming my voice, my ideas, and my place in the industry. I wanted others to know that they weren't alone, that there was power in speaking up and demanding accountability. Today, I look back on that chapter of my life with a mix of emotions. There's anger, yes, but also pride. I faced a formidable opponent and emerged victorious, not through violence or malice, but through truth and perseverance. And in doing so, I not only changed my own life, but also inspired others to fight for what's right. If there's one lesson I want you to take away from this story, it's this: never underestimate the power of your voice. Whether you're a designer, a writer, a programmer, or any kind of creator, your ideas matter. They are a reflection of who you are, and no one has the right to take that away from you. Stand firm, speak up, and trust that the truth will prevail. Because in the end, justice isn't about revenge. It's about restoring balance, protecting integrity, and ensuring that everyone gets the recognition they deserve.